Okay, I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the City of San Diego Commission on Police Practices, ad hoc transition planning committee meeting of October the 28th, 2022. I'm Doug Case and I am the chair, calling attendance from the Zoom screen. We have President Brandon Hilbert, the chair of the commission. We have Nancy Vaughn, Commissioner, Robin Spruce, Commissioner. We have Katie Avendetti from Women Occupy, who was our liaison, Ms. Endingas Progestis. We have our outside counsel, Dwayne Bennett. We have our interim executive director, Charmaine Mosley. We have our executive assistant, is that the correct term, for Elena Conde. And we have David Niemeyer from the CPS HR search firm. And we can go ahead and put the agenda up on the screen, Elena. And did we receive any public comment?
No public comment received.
Okay. And so we'll just go down the agenda. The first item is the budget process. Nothing new on the budget process. The second is the staffing process, and we have two active searches, one for the community engagement coordinator and one for the supervising investigator. The committee met on Monday of this week, I think it was, to select the individuals for the community engagement panel to interview. And I forget how many we decided. Was it five? Five individuals. And Dave and Robin are working to set up those meetings with the community engagement panel. And I don't know if you have any update on that.
Yes, Doug. Yeah, they're meeting Thursday afternoon. So should have some recommendations then shortly after that.
Okay, so they're interviewing all five in one day?
They are. Yep, November the 3rd.
Good. Okay. Anything you want to add, Robin?
Nope.
Okay. And where are we in terms of making the we're getting the report for the initial applicants for the investigating supervisor and sorry, supervising investigator?
Well, I mean, the report is done, so I think we just need feedback in terms of where you want to go with this semifinal candidates. So,
okay. So you probably need to set up the committee meeting to review the report and decide which ones to interview. And we actually will be talking about the selection committee and new business, and so we'll wait till then. Nothing new on the implementation ordinance or the amended standard operating procedures. I don't think there's anything new on office space since last week, is there?
No.
And nothing new on standing rules. Anything on community outreach other than the community panels?
Wait, I'm sorry. Say that again. Were you asking a question?
Yeah, I was asking you if there's anything new on community outreach.
No.
Okay, and then that then brings us to meetings with the mayor and city council members, and the staff is working on setting up meetings with the city council members who've already met, as you previously reported, with a council president, Sean Elo Rivera. And so we have 8 more to meet with. What we plan to discuss with them is 3 things. And number 1 is our proposed operating procedure for the nominating committee to select the permanent members of the commission. And second is the proposed operating procedure for the selection of the permanent executive director. And third is to give them an update of a general update of the commission in terms of, you know, our workload, the progress we're making on staffing and other office space and other transition projects. Any questions regarding that? Okay. And we have no new business, and so that'll bring us to I said we have no unfinished business. That'll bring us to new business. The first item is the selection committee for the supervising investigator position. As I recall, that was going to be the cabinet and a community member. Is that correct, Charmaine?
That is correct.
Okay. And Robin tested the waters with the community panel, and none of them were interested in doing double duty. And I was going to suggest that we ask Kate if she'd be willing to do that. I know that Kate had some court obligations coming up, and maybe depending upon when the timing of that, we may be able to accommodate her. So, A, first of all, would you be interested and willing? And then B, we can talk about schedule.
I'm more interested in being on the nominating committee for the permanent commissioners than the investigator. Andrea might be interested in the investigator because she's more involved in those procedures.
She's on the panel right now and wasn't interested, but I can certainly specifically target Andrea and see if, because you recommended her, she might be more interested.
Well,
and I don't know. I didn't know that. I forgot that she was on the community panel. But as far as my timing, Doug, I'm out of town next week, and then I'll be back.
Okay.
The week of the 7th. So.
Okay, so maybe
I can also check with other Women Occupy members if you want before I leave. I'm not leaving till tomorrow.
Yeah. You know, I forget
Wait,
the
Doug,
woman.
was this for the investigator, or this was for the?
We're talking about the investigator.
Okay, I was thinking
Investigator.
the community. I didn't ask them about the investigator. I asked them about the community.
Oh,
Final
okay.
community screen.
No, that's right. Actually, we need it for both. That's a good point, because we need it for both. Would you want to contract? Do you want to contact Andrea, Robin? If not, I can do it.
Sure, but to be clear, which one am I asking her about?
Actually, ask her for both.
Okay.
And they may be two separate individuals.
Okay.
Because it does take, some time. One person that comes to mind, and I'm forgetting her name. Kate can probably help me. The other co-chair of San Diegans for Justice.
Yeah, Marissa. There's
Marissa.
only two members of San Diegans for Justice, Marissa and Andrea.
Okay. And so Marissa may be interested in, or maybe either one. So maybe she would be a person that might be interested. And so if you can make that contact, Robin, and then let me know.
Yeah,
afterwards.
I don't know Marissa, nor do I have contact information for her. So should I just start with Andrea and see what she says?
Yeah, I start with Andrea, and Andrea will give you contact information for Marissa.
Potentially.
I'm sure she will. And okay, so hopefully we can have some success there, so we can move forward on those. And actually, I guess the supervising investigator panel member is, or interviewing panel member is more important, because we need to begin the screening of the initial applicants.
So I have a question. So you're not interested in my proposal that I be on the nominating committee for the permanent commissioners? You want to ask Andrea or Marissa?
We're just talking about interviewing these people.
Yeah,
right now.
That's item B. So item A is,
Oh, okay, I thought we were doing both at the same time. Okay.
and, oh, and so, okay, and so, yeah, so Robin, if you can make that connection and the person to serve on the interviewing committee for the supervising and investigator is our most immediate need, because we need to determine who our field is going to be from David's report. And remind me, David, how many applicants we received and how many that you recommended, and then do you have an A list and a B list like you did on the other one?
Yeah, there's oh gosh, the number off the top of my head, I think was in the 50s maybe, but I think I've got down, yeah, there's several in the A group and then a few in the B group. So
Okay. Then we can move on to item B. And that is the process for selecting members of the nominating committee for the permanent commissioners. If you want to scroll down, Alina, to and I think it was toward the end, as I recall, to the operating procedure for the I could be wrong, but I thought it was like the last 2 pages. Or maybe not. Okay.
Scroll all the way to the end.
Oh, I was right. Okay. And so you can stop there. It says the commission shall appoint a nominations committee to be composed of 9 persons, 3 current or former commission members, and 6 community members to be chosen by the commission. And of those 6 community members, we wanted to have 2 academic professionals who specialize in policing, community justice, and civil rights, and 4 from a community non-profit organizations with relevant expertise in various fields, including but not limited to racial and identity profiling. And we wanted to make sure that at least one of the community members or representatives in the community organizations was a youth in the 18 to 24 age group. And so that basically is several groups. We have 3 CPP current or former board members. We have 2 academic professionals. And then let me say 3 community organizations and 1 community organization youth representative. Okay. And so the question is, how do we go about selecting those 9 people? I mean, they're appointed by the commission, but we obviously want to give some nominations to them. So number 1 is, how do we see who is interested in doing it, and perhaps we'll need to do some recruitment. You know, in terms of the you know, CPP members, we can you know, send an email out to all of the current CPP members who to see if any, to see who would be interested in being considered for the position. I mean, for the job, it'll be probably a fairly time-consuming task because we will have hopefully lots of applicants, and the plan is to interview all of the applicants. So it could be and then deliberating and coming up with a decision. So it could be a fairly time-consuming task, and so we need to put that up, make that up front. But it's also an important one. Charmaine, what would be the best way of notifying a former CPP? What it says, this is a good question. There's current or former commission members. And I wonder whether we should have said commission or CRB members. So let's answer that question first. We didn't think of that last week.
Well, I think you clearly mean former CRB members as well as former commission members.
Yeah, I think that was the intent. I'm just reading.
And I would think that you would put out some sort of an announcement that could go out to all I mean, you have the contact information for all the former CRB people and current commissioners, and then an announcement that community groups could put out to our contacts.
So yeah, so maybe we ought to come up with a flyer or announcement, as Kate said, identifying this opportunity is here, and then have people respond if they are interested. But we may have. But going back to my question, do we have a good list, Charmaine, of former CPP or CRB members?
We do we have the contact information, so we can most likely put a list together.
Okay, and so after we come up with the flyer, then we can send that flyer out via email to all of those people. That probably is the easier of the three. The next one, with two academic professionals who have expertise in policing, criminal justice, and civil rights law. What would be a good way to get the word out?
I think we could reach out directly to some of the departments at the various universities. And we could see, I mean, who might be interested in possibly doing that.
Okay, and so what departments would we be looking at? We would look at, obviously, criminal justice. What are some other, and I would say we would try not just well, I would try the four-year universities, including UCSD and SDSU and USD, maybe Point Loma Nazarene, and but maybe the law schools as well. Obviously,
I think for civil rights law, we'd probably, I mean, that's the one place I would think we'd probably look to try to find someone with the civil rights law piece would be law schools. And I think obviously we can all just do a press release and work with the media to help kind of extend the reach of the request as well.
Okay, and so the law schools are Cal
USD
West,
and Cal Western,
Cal
USD,
West-
and Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson.
I think you also want community colleges,
Yes,
not just four-year universities and colleges.
yes, and so probably the well, perhaps Southwestern, although Southwestern doesn't really serve the city, but clearly the community colleges that serve the city, including City College and Mira Mesa. Isn't there a third one?
There's a ton. So there's a community college district, which is actually governed by San Diego Unified School District,
Right.
which would provide you really good parameters around that.
Right. I'm trying to remember what institutions are part of the district. It's not that many schools. But and maybe we can look at the majors that are that are offered there to find appropriate majors to send to the the deans of those schools. Okay, and then and I think maybe we could do the same flyer for all these different groups.
I can join. We don't have chat, do we? Because I have the link to San Diego to the community college district.
Yeah, we don't have chat, but anyway, I can look that up, or you can send it to me.
I'm sending it to you right now.
Okay, and then we can, well, I guess send the same flyer to different community nonprofit organizations. And I would like for that to be a fairly broad, and so not just the the activist organizations that have been part of our roundtables and so forth, but trying to find representatives from like community councils and so forth throughout the city. And Charmaine, could somebody on the staff find out whether or not the city has like a mailing list of community organizations? I know at one time that they had but this was a while back, that they had a person who was specifically designated for that, but I'm pretty sure.
I can ask Alina to check with the communications department.
Okay, and so yeah, it'd be good to do that. So it sounds like probably our first step before we send out the flyer is to develop the flyer. And who wants to raise their hand to work on the flyer?
Staff can develop the flyer.
Okay, so Charmaine will develop the flyer. Okay, can you get that done by next Friday, do you think?
We can try.
Okay, and then why don't we put that on the agenda for next week, and we can look over the flyer, and then we can approve the flyer and begin sending it out.
And will the flyer also have either an application with it or a contact place to get an application, I assume, and a deadline?
Yes, and those are three good things. I don't think we need a complicated application, but we definitely want to have a brief application indicating why they're interested, what their background is, and so forth. So,
Well, in which category?
Wouldn't that be on if we added the link to the boards and commission, wouldn't that be satisfactory?
what do you mean?
If they're going to apply?
No, we're talking about people who are applying to be on the nominating committee.
Oh, okay.
And so we have to select the nominating committee, the nominating committee will select the other people. But I think Kate raises a good point. I think we ought to have the flyer, we ought to have a brief application and allow them to submit a resume if they want to submit that with the application. We can decide on the deadline next week, and we can have them, send it to send the applications to Charmaine. And then after we see how many, well, I guess the next question is the deadline. And we don't want to get the cart too far ahead of the horse, because we need to have this operating procedure approved by the city council. So before we can convene the nominating committee, we need to have the city council bless the nominating committee procedure. But I want to be able to roll it out as soon as they have done that. So maybe the deadline, we can hold off for a while until we can find out when we can get the operating procedure docketed. Okay. And then after we get them, anyway, after we have a deadline, we can have this committee review them, depending upon how many there are. You know, we may just, you know, accept the, you know, all the people who, I don't think we're going to have a huge number of people who are going to be willing to invest as much time as it's going to take to do that. But if we have more than 9, you know, then maybe this committee can make a recommendation to the full board, but it's the full board who, the full commission who will need to make the appointments. And then also with regard to community organizations, we also want to make sure that we include organizations that have a youth program. Obviously, Mid-City Can would be a prime candidate for that, but there, you know, are others that we want to probably include as well. And also, depending on how many applicants we get, we may need to, you know, do some recruitment of making some phone calls or talking to people to encourage interest.
I have a question. Did we decide that if someone is picked for this committee, if they have to be involved in all the way through? I'm thinking of particularly the youth person who might not, I mean, if it takes really a lot of time, you know, maybe Mid-City Can or someone could designate 1 or 2, or we're just going to say one person has to commit to do them all. I know that
my sense would be we probably have one person do them all, because when you're trying to, when you have some people who interview some people or another person who interviewed another, it's hard to do that. You know, but you know, we have the 18 to 24 age group, and so, you know, there could be I think we should be able to find somebody who would be willing to
yeah, I
do
think,
it, but-
and I think that time's going to be an issue for everyone. So
right.
Yeah.
And but I'm not sure a way around that, because we have committed to interviewing all the people who and they don't have to be, you know, half-hour interviews, but my guess is they're probably going to be scheduling, you know, at least 15 to 20-minute interviews. And so if we get you know, 50 to 100 applicants, you know, it could take a while to get through them. So and then the outreach committee and the recruitment committee are going to have a joint meeting coming up, I think on the 17th, but I don't, is that the correct date? To work out a plan to promote the openings on the commission to the broader public. And so we'll have to do an outreach, you know, a second outreach, and we will happily refer that to delegate that to that committee. Okay, anything else on item number B? Okay, then let's go back to the agenda. So scroll all the way back up. And the last item we have for today is the operating procedure for review and evaluation of IA investigations of alleged misconduct, which essentially is a proposed rewriting of our interim standard operating procedure. Modifying it to include not just complaint-driven investigations, but also all investigations are done by the department. And again, this will be a procedure that the new commission, once they are appointed, will have to approve. But we want to the degree possible, give the new commission some proposed procedures so they can expedite, getting about their business. And so I wanted to get some thoughts here in terms of what we think that process should be. I can start maybe the discussion by thinking, I think we need to streamline it from what we currently do, because we're going to have more cases, probably at least a 40% increase in the number of cases that we have to review. And in addition, the commission is going to have several other duties other than just the review and evaluation of cases. We all are aware of all the different responsibilities of the commission. Having said that, I do think that our process of utilizing volunteers and teams to look at cases is a pretty solid way of providing community oversight. And most oversight agencies across the country, most of the review and evaluation is actually done by staff members and not by volunteers. And I would like to find a good balance so that we would continue to have a volunteer-driven review of complaints, but do it in a way that is much less time-consuming than we have now. And thinking perhaps along the lines of perhaps making all cases the same way that we currently audit Category 2 cases, with the ability of the teams, to delve into it more extensively if they feel a case merits that. Anyway, so that's kind of like a high level of what I would envision. But I'd like to get feedback from others. So I guess some of the key questions that we have to answer is, do we want to continue to have the review and evaluation be volunteer driven by teams? So I guess that's the first question. And then the second question is, if so, how can we streamline that so that the workload is manageable for members of the community who want to serve but may not have the ability to devote 40 hours a month to the work of the commission. So, thoughts? Okay, since nobody's speaking up, I'll call on people. How about Diana? What are your thoughts?
I still think it should be volunteer commissioners driven. I'm sure that we could work out a way that it could be streamlined so that it doesn't require as many hours. Like Brandon, I was like shocked into thinking when I started on the board, this was a full-time job. I'm like, ooh, I wasn't sure about that. So I don't know how much streamlining we can do. I know even with the investigators coming on board, I'm just not, in my mind, I'm not clear as to how much of the work they're going to do and how much work that we're going to still ask the volunteers to do. So that's my thinking. I think we'll have to come to a happy medium and figure out how that's going to work. But I still think that it should be volunteer based. I think if it becomes something else, then our review portion becomes not what the community wants.
Well, and I agree with you. I think that probably is one of the strengths of our model, is that we do use, true civilians, and by true civilians, I mean not just I mean volunteers, not people who work full-time in evaluating complaints
Right.
to oversee the process. Robin, what are your thoughts?
Well, and I think it's tricky because as we've talked about ad nauseum, and part of the reason that my understanding of a little bit driving the commission's creation at all is to make this experience more accessible for people who don't have the luxury of time or don't have the luxury of being in a salaried position with flexible hours, right? And so I do think that we need to consider how this is going to strike a balance between reducing the workload involved in being on the commission so that we're reaching out to folks that haven't been able to participate in the past, while also maintaining, I think, the really solid point that Diana makes, which is we want this to be driven by people who are being affected by police oversight. So I think it's sticky.
Okay. Kate.
Well, I think I'm gonna kind of leave it to the people who do the work, but obviously I think that it should be completely community-based and community-driven and volunteer-driven. And but it seems to me that there may be at some point some ability for trained staff to do a little bit of screening of complaints, but having never seen one, any of the complaints, all I know is, the discussions I hear in open session. It's
Okay.
kind of hard for me to make an assessment about that.
Okay. What happened to Nancy? Wasn't she on here?
She was. I've noticed she's been dropping out and back on, so I suspect she's having connectivity problems.
Okay. Is she in the waiting room just to make sure?
Yes, I keep promoting. It's just gonna take a second for her, I think, to accept it.
Okay.
You can allow her to talk.
Okay.
Okay. And I see her there. So if you can unmute, can Nancy unmute herself?
Yes, she should be able to.
Okay. I see her unmuted. Nancy, did you hear the question?
No, I did not. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So we're talking about the proposed procedure for review and evaluation of IA investigations. And the first question is, should it continue to be volunteer driven? And I guess maybe a part B of that question is, should it also, if so, should it be done in teams? And then our second question after we answer that is, how do we go about doing that in a way that makes the workload manageable?
I'm the wrong person to ask, Doug.
So you don't have any thoughts? Part of the issue, frankly, is that not everybody has as much time as you do to devote to doing case review. So how do we go about that? So if you want to pass, we can come back to you.
Yeah, I'll pass.
Okay, Brandon.
I was gonna say, I think we should probably explain part of the reason why Nancy was chuckling is because she probably, compared to Doug and I, probably puts in about equal amount of time doing case review. So she does a lot more than probably should be expected of any volunteer commissioner. But no, I agree. I think the whole concept of the San Diego model of oversight is that it's driven by community members. And I think if we were to relinquish that to fully paid staff, I think it takes away from that. And I think what the city wants and the community wants is to actually have, as Doug pointed out, non-law enforcement community members that are actually looking and seeing what the complaints are. So I think that part, I think, needs to stay. I do think, and I think someone else brought it up a little bit earlier, I think, once we have full staff, maybe what we do is we have our staff, the people who, have 40 hours a week, they can, as complaints come in, they can look at each complaint and help us prioritize them when they come in, rather than, as we're doing now, is once they're assigned, and each team then kind of does a triage on that to figure out which ones need to be reviewed first. That might make it a little bit more efficient, but I'm certainly open to other ideas and any perspectives. And I know, we've had like Evie basically wants us to do it completely differently once we have new commissioners. But as I always try to, explain whenever I talk to the public about it is, when I first started, I knew there was going to be a significant time commitment, but I didn't realize how much of a time commitment, because reviewing cases and watching the body camera video, if you have to, read extra documents and all that kind of stuff, it does take a long time. And I think anyone who files a complaint wants to know that that complaint was properly looked at. And I don't want us to get to a point where people think that we just spent 20 minutes, talked about a case in a meeting and then voted on it and pushed it forward. Because I think that would go right to, I think some of the complaints we hear is you guys just rubber stamp what Internal Affairs does. And I want to make sure we're protecting ourselves so we don't have, anyone thinking that that's what we're doing. Because, obviously we know that we don't do that, but I think the community sometimes feels like we do. So I still think that, how we set teams, I think we need to make sure it's definitely more than one person reviewing a case, like we have now, because I think sometimes I've been on teams where two of us might agree, but someone, has a dissent. And I think that's an important part of our process, is to be able to get all those viewpoints from the community out there on a case. So in a weird way, I kind of like the way we do it now, but I think we can streamline it and make it a little more efficient, just so we can try to prioritize, the more serious complaints that have sustained findings first. But
and part of the time, and we've gotten better at this, but part of the time consuming part is writing the reports. And so I'm thinking that maybe we could have staff prepare like a template that has like a summary of the cases, and kind of fill in a template for us. And the responsibility of the commissioners would be to review the report and to look at relevant BWC and other evidence. Wouldn't necessarily expect them to listen to all the interviews unless they felt that there were some significant issues they wanted to listen to it and so forth. But what I'm thinking of is having a one-page form where they indicate whether they agree or disagree, and if they disagree, what the reason for the for the disagreement is. And I also, but this is a separate thing, but I think one fault with our current system is we don't really have a system of indicating whether or not we believe that the investigation was thorough and complete. We agree or disagree at the findings, and sometimes if we think it was not thorough, we don't indicate that in our case notes.
Exactly.
But actually, I think if I recall correctly, our checklist for the audits actually asked that question. And so maybe having something along the lines of the audit makes some sense. Okay, so that gives me something to work with, and I can put together something and bring it back. I may not get it done by next week, but I'll put together. And I'm also thinking in terms of the procedure itself, I want to make it somewhat skeleton, so we don't get into all the nitty-gritty details. We have basically explained what the process is, so that if something is not working well or needs to be refined, we don't have to go back to the city council every time you want to make a little change in how we want to do it. And so I'm thinking more along the lines of, this is what, this is the framework we're going to operate under, but allow the commission to have their implement it as they see fit, without having to have an operating procedure that every little thing you change, you go back to the city council, because that's not an effective way of doing it. So I'm thinking that it may be a shorter document than our current operating procedure. So Although I will say our current operating procedure, the interim operating procedure is significantly shorter than our standing rules for investigation, review, and evaluation that the previous commission developed. And so we kind of have done that to a certain degree, but I think we ought to streamline it even more. So any other thoughts on that?
Can you
Okay.
guys hear me?
Yes, we can. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Great. I'm sorry, I've had nothing but problems. This has been an awful, I may get dropped off in the middle of this. I spend about 2 to 4 hours doing what I would call the triage part of each case. And that I think you could have one of your investigators doing, and that would be the initial look at the allegations to make sure that they're all covered, the initial look at the findings to make sure they follow facts, and setting up a report so that it's the template kind of thing that you're talking about, I think, Doug, so that when somebody else comes on, they can concentrate on filling out the conclusions part of it. So there's a summary and the list of people in the beginning that matches what you will expect in the report. And it's just a matter of coming in and then starting and doing the actual investigation of the body worn camera and the interviews to make sure, in fact, even staff could go and listen to body worn camera, listen to interviews, make sure all of that stuff is consistent, and finding. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. It says join as panelist. I'm not going to do that right now. And finding inconsistencies where they exist, and that's the part that seems to me to be the most important in the beginning. And then it's ready for somebody else. So when I want Chris to work on something, I go through all of that, and it can take 4 hours to do it. And then the report is, like, I would say halfway there. And then somebody else, and in our case, I don't think we want to lose the teams, and I don't think we want to lose the community doing actual review and actually watching body worn camera and actually listening and trying to figure out and follow and make sure it's all consistently reflected in the facts that come through on the conclusions.
Let me ask you this: if we go with teams, I mean, initially we had 3-person teams. We thought that was important. Currently, because of our
I get
shortage, we're doing 2-person teams. But it occurs to me maybe we can do 2-person teams, and if there is a disagreement between the 2 people, then we could have a 3rd person who would join the review as a tiebreaker.
That sounds like a good idea.
So, okay. Anybody else want to chime in?
Chair, this is Dwayne. Excuse me, my camera's off. I've had a bit of a health challenge, so need to keep the camera off today. The only thing, could I just suggest one thing to the commission? The current model you use now has you in closed session the vast majority of the time. And you have to stay in closed session because there are so many cases. And if the goal of the commission is to be open and transparent, there are a lot of issues that are going on in the police department that need to be placed on the open agenda. There are trends in the department that should be discussed publicly and openly so that the public knows what is actually happening. And you can't do that. You honestly can't do it because you all are in closed session dealing with these cases, and it's an overwhelming burden for you. So whatever your model is, the ordinance requires you to do something different. The ordinance requires you, as a new commission, to put as much in the public's eyesight as possible. So we know there are a lot of things that you can't discuss publicly, and that's what's discussed in closed session. But the ordinance emphasizes that to the extent possible, items are taken and discussed publicly. And so whatever your model is, I just suggest the new commission needs to put an emphasis on public access and public discussion of some of these things. And for example, at CLERB, they discuss their investigators work, and they work these cases, and they will report items out publicly, just taking the officer's name out so that the public understands the nature of the complaints that the commission is looking at and what those findings are, et cetera. I think that's where the education and openness and transparency comes in at. So whatever your model is, I just think that the commissioners need to be freed up to have much more on the open agenda for public consumption, so the public can see. That's where the openness and transparency comes in. That's just a suggestion.
So is that something along the lines of revising the closed session agenda, Dwayne?
What happens, since you all are going to have investigators now, you're investigating a lot of, you're not, the commission's not going to have the luxury to just review what IA is doing and looking at discipline. You're going to have your own cases. So your investigators are going to go out there and separately and independently conduct investigations that the commission is going to have to act on. And what would happen in the context of those types of reports, where the commission itself is making its own separate recommendations and its own separate findings, is from closed session, your report might be that the commission conducted an investigation into an allegation that a police officer punched and beat a person. The person complained about the incident. There were various policy matters alleged. The commission's investigation determined that the use of force used by the officer was not in policy. It did not comply with the Graham versus Connor objective reasonableness standards or necessity standards. And the commission made a recommendation to the department that appropriate action should take place, something like that. That's the kind of report you would be able to give out and make publicly accessible and available once your investigators start conducting their own investigation.
Well, and we could do that as well with, I mean, we had our process for doing redacted case reports.
Right.
And which we've kind of suspended because of time thing, but we could actually go back to that and have the write-ups of the cases be done in a way that's already redacted, and so that we could report out in the open session, that same information that we currently have in our redacted case summaries, but instead of releasing them, the initial plan was to release them semi-annually. We could do them as we have our meetings. But we are going to be doing, but Dwayne raises a good point. We're going to have two different types of review and evaluation. We still have a duty to review and evaluate all investigations that Internal Affairs does. In addition, we have the duty to act on the recommendations of our investigators. And that's part of what I was getting at previously. There's other duties besides that as well. But so the new commission is going to have lots of duties, and so we need to make it in a way that it is more manageable. So any other thoughts? Okay, and I will take this under advisement as the judges would say, and I'll work on something and come back with a proposal. And actually, I'm not even sure that as we go through all the procedures that we outlined, I don't think we necessarily need to have all of them approved by the current commission, because it's not the current commission that is going to be acting on them. It's going to be the permanent commission. So I think our committee can work on drafts, and after the new commission is appointed, we can have drafts of all of the 18, whatever it was, procedures ready to give to them for them to do with as they may. Okay. Anything specifically for next week? Okay, well, we do have, if Charmaine's able to get it done in time, the review of the flyer and the application for being on the nominating committee. And then we can have updates on our staffing process, and at least have those two items on the agenda. Anything else for the agenda? Okay, then I think we're done, and we'll be finishing 2 minutes early today. And everybody have a good weekend, have a Halloween weekend, and we'll see you next week. Take care.